Auspicious greetings. Good to see everyone. Welcome to our monthly Thank Buddha. It's Friday, an hour of Dharma and community connections. My name is Cindy, based here in San Diego at Fang Temple. Before we get started, please, everyone on Zoom, please check if your mic is muted. And there will be opportunities at the end of this talk for us all to comment, to share our comments, to raise any questions regarding the talk. So for those on Zoom, you may put in your comments and questions in the chat box. And then for those who are in person at Fang Temple, please go to the designated hot seat to share your comments and your questions. Tonight, we are honored to have our guest speaker, Mr. Petrie, to share with us for this month TBIF, Faith and Climate Actions. Phil is an artist and a long-time environmental activist. Since moving to San Diego in 2007, he has been active in fighting climate change as a founding member of San Diego 350 and ICEJ. He sees this crisis as an opportunity for all of us to put our civilization on a truly sustainable footing, to place it not on top of, but within nature. His environmental beliefs are also deeply grounded in his Christianity. At St. Paul Episcopal Cathedral, where he is a member and where he worships, he co-founded Simpler Living, a creation care ministry dedicated to seeking a Christian response to the environmental crisis and our excessive consumerism by living more simply and sustainably in home, church, in this case temple, community, and the world. Phil lives in Normal Heights with his wife Mary and daughter Sarah. He enjoys hiking as well as reading and histories. For now, please help me and welcome Phil.
Thank you all very much. It's a real honor to be here, to be at the Buddhist temple, and I want to thank Venerable Miao Zhang for inviting me to speak here, and thank all of you for showing up, whether you show up in person or whether you show up online as well. That's probably way too long an introduction, so I will not belabor any more of that. That's plenty about me. Let's get right into the content of the talk, and we will see if I can do both of these things at the same time. Okay, that's right. So if I'm going to share screen, there we go. Okay, perfect. All right. Get to this. And I think that's full screen probably, right? Okay, good. You can see, so one thing that didn't get mentioned about me is I don't always do two things very well at once. So, and I don't have a laptop actually. I do work on a computer a lot. I'm not such a Luddite that I don't have a computer, but anyway, it's a tower. So what we're going to do tonight is talk about faith and action and the Interfaith Coalition for Earth Justice, which I'm a part of, and the environmental crisis. Out of all those different pieces we'll be floating around, we're going to deal with actually a number of the things that are in our name, the Interfaith Coalition for Earth Justice. So earth and interfaith and faith and justice. We're going to kind of take things in that order. So I'll go to the next slide. I think I'm going to the next slide. So let me just see. Maybe just click on it. It'll probably go. There we go. Okay. And is the stop share thing, that's up top kind of in the way, isn't it? Let's see. And then get rid of it. Hide floating meeting controls. There we go. It came back. Well, let me try that one more time. I'm an artist, so visual things mean something to me. I always hate this when there's some kind of thing up there. Let me just see if I can do this. Hide floating meeting controls. Let's try it again. Okay, I think we're good. Hopefully that'll go away. There it is. Okay, perfect. All right. So anyway, on Earth, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's kind of actually happening in terms of not just climate change, but in terms of the environmental crisis as a whole. All right. Just so it's not a lot of history. I'm kind of an armchair historian. I love history, but a little bit of history. And of course, this is a summer where we are seeing all of these high temperatures, especially in the US, right? Breaking records all over the place, especially in certain towns like Phoenix and so forth, over 100 for multiple days. And we don't need to go into the weeds on what exactly this chart is. It's basically looking at the baseline temperature from 56 to 76 compared to that period from 2011 to 2021. And you can see, the red places are +4 centigrade or 7.2 Fahrenheit. But anyway, the bottom line is it's really getting warmer. What's kind of surprising about this chart is that it's especially getting warmer at the North Pole. And some of you may have already followed that's where the most dramatic warming is. I'm not a climate scientist, so I can't say why that is. I'm not sure we know why that is, but it is disturbing and puzzling. Not so bad in Antarctica down there. And so just to kind of talk about what's happening, how do we get here in the middle of this environmental crisis? So it took 500 million years for mostly plant, but some animal matter to sort of filter to the bottom of these ancient lakes, get a lot of rock, other detritus on top of them, rock eventually, blah, blah, blah. Massive pressure over 500 million years that created oil, coal, and natural gas, the fossil fuels. That's why they're called fossil fuels, right? Because they're made actually from fossils of mostly plants. So that didn't happen overnight. That's a long time for that very concentrated form of energy, of fuel that we found. And then this is interesting, just getting ready for this talk, I was not aware of this. Our first real record of Homo sapiens using fossil fuels is from China, from 4000 BC, so 6,000 years ago. And I don't know I don't know the weeds on this. I kind of wish I did. But in any event, we found some coal, and it would appear to be they were burning coal for heat. Okay, so it's probably not the beginning, but it's what we have as far as knowing. So there's a long history of human beings and fossil fuels. But of course, the key thing is, for most of human history, that was just a drop in the bucket. It was very, very small. It took the Industrial Revolution in England to take coal and use it to power steam engines. And suddenly now you have these engines that can increase our power multiple times and get all these tasks done that took way, way longer in the past, as well as then create all these vehicles that get us from one place to another, the train first and so forth and so on. So basically, the Industrial Revolution and the energy of the fossil fuels that we tap into, starting with coal, but then moving into oil and natural gas, create our modern civilization. That's the good part, sort of. The bad part is, unfortunately, the burning of fossil fuels also releases CO2 into the atmosphere, which creates a blanket, in a sense, over the atmosphere and traps the sun's heat and therefore warms the planet. And when you think about it, of course, it's not completely surprising that this very, very compacted fuel source, the fossil fuels, again, 500 million years to create this stuff, that when you use it, when you burn it, there are side effects. It's a very, very concentrated form of energy, so it's releasing a lot of energy. Again, one site I was looking at online said that in the roughly 300 years since the Industrial Revolution began, we've used up about half of the fossil fuels. Now, we don't really know, because I don't think we know how many fossil fuels are really down there. But, we've blown through a lot very, very quickly. And the problem is, are we going to wait another 500 million years for the next crop of fossil fuels to be ready to go? I don't think so. So we've got to figure something else out. This isn't working, and we're also, of course, overheating the planet by using them in the first place. So the other piece, of course, of this, there's really two other key pieces. We'll get to the third one in a second, is human population. Human population has increased dramatically in just really the last, several hundred years. We'll get to a data in a minute, but you can see that flat line, going way back 10,000 BCE. And then, just a slight increase there around the year zero, the Middle Ages, into the Middle Ages, and so forth and so on. But basically, it's not till 1804 that human population reaches 1 billion. We're now 1 billion on the planet, approximately. Again, these are estimates because we don't have for sure concrete numbers. It's now in 2023 about 8 billion. Okay. So that increased, if you've ever looked at those things, it's like it doubles in increasingly shorter amounts of time, moving from 1 to 8 billion. With this many of any species on the planet, it wouldn't matter if it was Homo sapiens or whoever it was, there'd be these impacts on other species, right? They would be pushed to the side. They would be, in many ways, kind of compromised. That's just kind of in the nature of it when you have a species, I think, that becomes so dominant. So population is an issue, but just as big an issue, if not more of an issue, is the fact that in the West, and this is partly because of the Industrial Revolution, we created this very consumerist culture with lots of stuff. Suddenly we could manufacture all kinds of things, and we could manufacture things so that you buy a car in 1953, and then they're encouraging you to buy a car again in 1957. Why not get the new model with the big fins on it, and so forth and so on? So you evolve because of the technology and because of a shift in values, and we'll maybe talk a little bit about that in a second. We get this very consumerist culture in the West. Now, some of the resources that are used to create things are renewables, like forests. It doesn't happen overnight, but they will grow back. But some of them, like minerals, a lot of the minerals that we use for these things, right? Some of the rare minerals, those are limited supply. So we run out of those unless we figure out a way to make them artificially. We can't use those. And all these things compacted. So we're looking at the population explosion. We're looking at the technological revolution. And then we're looking at this consumerism. All three of those things together have led to this degradation of much of the life on the planet. And we probably all know about that. I'm not going to go through all those things, but overfishing in the oceans, acidification, the elimination of ecosystems, extinction of animal and plant species. Again, you probably heard that we're now in the 6th mass extinction event. And as far as I know, the only mass extinction event driven by one species, unfortunately, us. All right. So I wanted to say a little bit about that first bullet point here. And by the way, we'll have some images in a minute. It won't just be text, I promise you. But I believe deeply that the roots of our environmental problems are ethical and spiritual. And what do I mean by that? Okay. What I like to say is that consumerism is essentially trying with a lot of stuff to fill what I would call a God-sized hole. You would call it something else, probably. I said to Mary, should I say Buddha-sized hole? That doesn't seem right. I don't think that's right. But anyway, you get the point. So that instead of focusing on spiritual things and serving one another and loving one another and having compassion for all the beings on the earth, instead we're sort of on this chain of desire of buying more and more stuff. And that's one way that we show that we're important. The person with the most stuff at the end wins, that kind of thing. It's also just true that you get on this sort of wheel that you guys know very well of kind of addiction, right? And unfortunately, I see this with my daughter. She's and she was raised by my wife, and I did the best we could, but of course she's rebelling, right? She rebels by becoming a good consumer. So, she likes to get new things. She gets rid of some of the old things. So she says, Dad, I'm living pretty simply. Well, she's living simply by getting rid of the old things so she can go to the store and buy something new. Anyway, there's a lot of that. I believe deeply that the faith traditions, all the great faith traditions, are fundamentally at their root sustainable because their values are elsewhere instead of consumerism. The values of the great world religions are about what truly is and what is life really about. Why are we really here? And it's never the answer, at least as far as I know, with none of the great world religions is we're here to buy a lot of stuff. No, we're here to achieve nirvana, to get off the wheel of desire. We're here to love and serve one another. We're here to sort of worship Allah in full submission. These are the reasons that the great religions tell us we're here. It's not about consumerism. They all speak to the environmental crisis in their own unique way, that the earth is sacred and that it's worthy of our stewardship. And then I do want to say, so there's so much about our time in 2023, 21st century, that's kind of depressing, okay, including climate change. But I think one of the true glories of this time, and of, say, the last 50 years at least, probably longer than that, honestly, is true interfaith dialogue has been happening. This does give me hope that human beings do learn some things. Instead of hitting each other over the head because we have the right religion and you don't, and by God, we're going to show you the way, and if you don't get the way, we're going to hit you over the head. We're talking to each other. We're learning from each other. And I feel that that's how you can become a better Christian or a better Buddhist, is by engaging with other religions and learning from them. And that's one reason to me that the Interfaith Coalition for Justice, the interfaith piece is so important. Because again, it's about coming together and sharing what we already know. Now, what we're going to do with the next 6 slides is look at the great world religions and see one particular thing that they bring to the table. You know, you could slice this a lot of different ways, because these great religious traditions are very complicated and rich, and they have a lot of things going on. But so I've made choices, and they're not always the best ones. But anyway, they are what they are. So with Judaism, and the order here, there's no particular order. Anyway, whatever. I do end with Christianity. That's probably my own, that's a bias of mine, I'm sure. Anyway, Judaism, if you know Genesis, and some of you might, and some of you might not at all, but in the book of Genesis, the first book in the Hebrew Bible, there's the creation story. And God takes 6 days to create the entire earth and the sun and the moon and the planets. And at the end of every day, God looks at what God did, what created, and says that it is good. And so I think to me there are 3 key takeaways from these readings and from this whole tradition. One is that God made the earth, not us. It's God's. God owns it. We do not own it. We never own it. In a sense, we're just in a position of being stewards, of being keepers for the big boss in the sky. The second is that creation is good. And I realize there's a range of opinion about that in different religions. I'm well aware of that. But anyway, in this tradition, creation is good. God sees that it's a good thing. And the third thing is that God sees it's a good thing before we're even on the scene. We're not made, I think, to the last day, day 6. And so the other 5 days, we're not even on the scene yet. And God never says, this is good because human beings are coming and they're going to really be able to use this stuff well and get ahead. And I'm really glad that, they'll be able to have whale blubber and blah, blah, blah. So in any event, it's good innately. That creation has its own innate goodness. It has nothing to do with, or it's not only to do with us. Now, Buddhism. Now, this is dangerous, right? Because I'm speaking here to Buddhists. So you can, and just people can raise their hand and correct me and say, wait a minute, you got that wrong. This was actually taken from, there's a pretty good site, the Yale Center for Religion and Environment, I think it is, or Religion and Ecology. And they have pages on each of the major world religions and kind of their positions vis-a-vis the environment and ecology. And one of the things they really emphasized was the idea of interdependence in Buddhism. And I did want to just, I need to look at my cheat sheet because I get lost with some of this stuff. So I'm just going to read directly from it. According to Buddhism, there is ultimately no such thing as a self independent from the rest of the universe, the doctrine of anatta. Impermanence, anicca, expresses the Buddhist notion that all compounded or conditioned phenomena, all things and experiences, are inconstant, unsteady, and impermanent. Everything we can experience through our senses is made up of parts, and its existence is dependent on external conditions. So as I understand that, that means that there is no thing in the universe that exists by itself. Everything in the universe is in relation to everything else and exists because it's part of this web of relationship. That doesn't happen otherwise. And to me, if we had internalized as a species, and I realize this would have been tricky in the West because we weren't Buddhist, particularly in the West during the Industrial Revolution, right? Maybe had made contact with Buddhism, but that's about the extent of it. But if we had truly internalized this idea of interdependence, that we would not have treated the world and its resources the way we have, because we would be aware that there are impacts. If you cut down an entire forest, you not only eliminate the homes of many animals and the plants that were sheltering there and all of that, but perhaps on some spiritual level, you do something to yourself, you do something to everything around it, maybe all life forms on the planet on some level. Everything's interconnected. So I really do love that interconnection piece. And nobody is raising their hand, so I guess I'm not too far off. Okay, good, thumbs up, thank you. Islam, and what I wanted to focus on here is stewardship. Islam, of course, came out of Arabia, Saudi Arabia. And so they were a desert people initially. And of course, if you're a desert people, you do not want to waste water. You do not want to waste food. You don't want to waste trees. There's not very many trees. There's not much of anything. So you have to be very mindful of what is there and of not wasting. And I love that quote. My father was a big one for not wasting things. He would appreciate this. O children of Adam, eat and drink, but waste not by excess, for Allah loveth not the wasters. And that's the stewardship is called Khalifa. And the last piece I would say about this, of course, is the irony that the more we do waste the world's resources, the closer we look to that kind of desert landscape. It's pretty much what we have here in San Diego anyway, except for the artificial irrigation, which we have a lot of. So it looks a lot greener than it used to, or than it normally would. But of course, as we continue to use up all these resources, we're likely to go in this desertification route. Living simply in terms of Hinduism, and of course, this is Mahatma Gandhi, one of the great Hindu, I would say, prophets, political leaders, the whole thing. And a couple stories I want to tell about Gandhi. You can read the quote there, but and again, for Gandhi, the point of living simply is to be in solidarity with the poor, to not put yourself above other people who have less things than you do. Gandhi, when he died, had just 10 possessions: a watch, spectacles, sandals, an eating bowl, and then must have been 6 others. They're not on the list. But so he made a choice to live very simply, and part of that too, I think, is to not get addicted to things too much, to try to make do with fewer things, maybe really appreciate them. I can imagine that his feeling about that. What did I say? It was a rice bowl. His eating bowl probably was rice. Well, maybe not. Cynthia. Anyway, his eating bowl probably really appreciated. I mean, I think one of the ironies of our consumerist culture is the more we get stuff, the less we appreciate one individual thing, because really that's not the point of it, right? The point is to get the next thing. So you don't really want to spend too much time appreciating the one you just got. Anyway, the story I wanted to tell about Gandhi. So Gandhi was meeting King George V. This is in England in 1931. And he was dressed in his dhoti, which is the sort of loincloth that he wore over his body, and then he had a shawl. So just those 2 pieces of clothing. And apparently a number of people had sort of said to him, I don't know if I can't remember. Did they call him Mahatma at that point? Anyway, Gandhi, you're going to be meeting King George. Maybe you should be dressed a little more formally, or blah blah blah. This maybe is inappropriate. And Gandhi stuck to his guns, and that's the way he dressed. And so a reporter has asked him afterwards whether he felt sort of underdressed in meeting King George V, and he said, "No, King George V had on enough clothes for both of us," which is, I think, wonderful. And and it's not only funny; it's a very strong, in a way, critique of kind of kings and royalty and all that ornate stuff that they tend to have, all the awards and the shoulder epaulets and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, very funny. But living simply, I think, is really, really important. And I think it's something, again, that if it's obviously sustainable. If you're living as simply as Gandhi does, we wouldn't be in this mess as well. Native Americans, a strong reverence for place, right, in Native American cultures. And this is Bear Butte or Bear Mountain, which is in South Dakota. This was holy to many of the Plains Indians. It was holy both to the Lakota and the Sioux and to the Cheyenne. And again, I'm going to cheat here. The Cheyenne know it as Noaha Vose. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. Excuse me to the Cheyenne, but called the Giving Hill. All right. And it's the place where Maheo'o, their god, imparted to Sweet Medicine, a Cheyenne prophet, the knowledge from which the Cheyenne derive their religious, political, social, and economic customs. So this is the mountain as kind of like with Moses and the Ten Commandments, except it sounds even more extensive in a way. The mountain as this meeting place with the divine, and where a culture gets started, gets put on its right footing. I want to compare that attitude toward the mountain with mountaintop removal, which, as far as I know, has only happened in my lifetime. I was born in 1958. I don't think they were doing this before, probably not before like 1970. I'm not quite sure when it started. But you probably know this is basically the thing that we started here in the States. We Americans can be proud to blow the top off the mountain and get the coal that way. Blow the top off, and then you just go with your big dump trucks and scoop up the coal and put it in the dump trucks, and out you go. And in theory, you put the mountain top back, kind of. It's not quite the same, right? So you can see, again, a very, very different attitude for what a mountain is for. What is a mountain for? Is it a place where we may actually meet the divine? And another part of this that's fascinating is around this Bear Mountain, there are human remains, human artifacts dating back 10,000 years. So this has probably been a holy site for something like 10,000 years, way back. That's like that chart we looked at where the human population's kind of way at the bottom, the very beginning of that period. Okay. Anyway, I was sort of lost my train there, but what we're doing is using the mountain just as a source for energy. And we want to get that energy as easily as we can, no matter what it means for the mountain. Okay, and then Christianity. So this is the foot washing that happens at the Last Supper. And, this, again, probably some of you know it and others of you maybe don't, but this is where at the Last Supper, before Jesus will be crucified by the Romans, he washes the feet of all the disciples. And again, one of the things to think about is that in first century Jewish culture, probably first century classical culture, period, if you're washing somebody else's feet, you're of a lower social class. If you're the one washing their feet, they're of a higher class, you're of a lower class to wash their feet. It's a kind of way of maybe a form of submission even, or whatever. So when Jesus is going to do it to Peter, Peter says, no, yeah, absolutely not, Lord. You can't wash my feet. And I'm pretty sure, I meant to check with my wife, she's a theologian, but I'm pretty sure that's when Jesus says, get thee behind me, Satan. Not because St. Peter is Satan, but because he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand that what Jesus is trying to do, even though he is their rabbi, is he's trying to stand this whole thing on its head of, what you will serve everyone else. If you want to be a real follower of me as Jesus the rabbi, you need to serve everybody else. That kind of service and humility, I think, if the West had really stuck to it. Problem was the West didn't always stick to it at all. I think, again, would lead to a very different attitude toward nature. You know, if you just include nature kind of in that, then you're maybe a lot less willing to just run rampant over it the way we have tended to. Okay, so let's see, I'm not doing too bad, I guess, time-wise. So on to the justice and action part, having looked at what the faiths bring to the table. This is just this definition of justice there, just came off the internet, but I liked it. It was a good one. The quality of being fair and just, moral soundness, conformity to truth. So again, there's a sense there of justice being in some way conforming to what actually is, what actually exists. And I do think there's a similarity here to right thinking, concepts of right thinking in the sense of moral soundness and other things. And what I would say is that earth justice should never just be about saving the forests or saving the polar bears or saving the coral reefs, all of which is really, really good. And I guess I would argue that sometimes we spend so much time helping other human beings and we forget about the coral reefs and all that stuff, and that's a problem. But earth justice means justice for all the creatures that call Earth home, and of course that includes us. And again, we're just part of this continuum of life forms on the earth. So that means it includes human justice. It includes racial justice. It includes economic justice. And then, of course, to have justice truly happen, we have to act. So now I'm going to get into what does ICEJ do? And we do the best we can. Is it earth-shaking? Probably not. That's okay. We do the best we can. So we were actually founded there's two key founding events for us. In 2015, there was an event called Answering Earth's Call, which was at the cathedral where I worship, which is St. Paul's over in Bankers Hill. But I actually had nothing to do with putting that together. It was put together primarily by San Diego 350, which I was a part of at that point, because I go back to 350's beginning in 2011. But again, like I said, I really wasn't part of getting this event together. And it was at the same time that Pope Francis visited Congress and was talking about Laudato Si, which had just come out, his encyclical about the environment and about earth justice. The idea was from that event that some kind of group would form and begin to do some things. That was the vision of the people who kind of got it going. But it didn't quite happen. There was a 2-year hiatus where nothing really happened. Maybe there was a meeting. I'm not even sure. There was one meeting. But there was an interfaith team as part of San Diego 350, and I was part of that team. And part of our walking papers were to reboot this, whatever we were going to call it. Turned out we would call it the Interfaith Coalition for Justice. So then it finally happened. That's proof, of course, that, if at first you don't succeed, try again, and you wait. We do things imperfectly, and that's okay. I do want to give a real plug to San Diego 350 because they're ICEJ's fiscal agents. We frankly wouldn't exist without them. We use their database. We piggyback on a lot of their campaigns. You'll see some of that in the other pictures. And they're a great organization. They're not faith-based though. We are faith-based. They are not. And they're very pointed toward kind of direct actions, rallies and protests, and even risking arrest. ICJ has not risked arrest yet. I would love to see us do that, but we haven't. Okay, so we have three kind of elements that we keep talking about: to educate, equip, and mobilize. So we're just going to look at some examples of each three. And in terms of educating, and these are sort of educating, equip, and mobilizing faith communities like yourself to sort of take action on climate change, on the environmental crisis as a whole thing. Okay. So we've had a series of talks online. They've all been online, and they're all right there. So you can see we just have about 2 a year, not a lot. But I don't know if you know Larry Ward, the Buddhist who was here last. He gave a talk last fall called "Be Not Afraid." And I know Buddhism, like Christianity, there's all kinds of different forms of Buddhism, right? I don't know that, and I'm not even master of all the Christian wrinkles there. But anyway, they run the gamut. Some of them are more kind of about the science, like Aaron Gross was talking about industrial farming and the pandemic. That was right in the middle of the pandemic. So it was very timely. Sometimes it's about things happening with climate, like you can see with the talk about the conference of parties in Paris and then in Glasgow later. That's Penny Clark over there. She went to both of those. And then the last one was about investing in our values, how you can use your money and move your money away from banks that fund the fossil fuel industries or investment houses that do the same. Go to the next one, equip. So this is where I actually met the Venerable Miao Zhang, was at this event. And so I think deeply that as people of faith, it's in our faith that we will find the motivation to take action on this stuff. It's through our faith. And that means, too, maybe interfaith worship services, kind of coming together with different traditions, trying to do different things all at once. It can be a little confusing, but it's kind of a glorious mess. That's another way, I think, to tap into different traditions and get the riches there and get empowered to do things. We've had workshops as well and retreats. And, you know, I wanted to say, I'll say this now, it could come at any point really in this talk, but, you know, if one of you were to ask me, what can I do about the climate crisis? What's the one thing? If I'm only going to do one thing, what's the one thing that I can do? And honestly, I think the key thing I would say is go deeper into Buddhism. Go deeper into your tradition. What is that? You will know probably what needs to happen. What's kind of the next step for you in terms of Buddhism? As for me, it would be Christianity. But my feeling is when we go deep into our faiths, we will be empowered to do the right thing. I really think that's true. So there's no separation there, in my opinion. It's not like, oh, I'm going to put all the praying and the meditating aside so I can do a lot of political rallies. I don't think so. I think that would be the wrong thing to do. So at this event, we called this Earth, Air, Water, Fire, and we had a lot of different things kind of going on. We had some prayers, we had sharing for children, so we had sea balls, we had water whistles, we had some rain sticks. Some of them didn't, they fell apart on us. But anyway, I think the kids did have some fun, and I think people got something out of it. It was there in Balboa Park, right by the big fig tree. And we've had a couple of these interfaith services now. We will continue to do that. Another thing we do in terms of equipping, so that's kind of equipping on a spiritual level. But we also believe that it's good to equip people in terms of simple kind of hands-on, you know, things. So we have a BIPOC outreach program. That's Black, Indigenous, people of color, right? For those of you that don't know BIPOC. But and we have partnered with Grid Alternatives on that one. We've only been doing this for about a year, and it's definitely launched, but we still need to improve some things and work. And what we're basically trying to do, we're working in sort of the neighborhoods of southern San Diego, frontline communities, sending out emails and phone calls to places of worship, and that would be any place of worship that's in the area. And then trying to do follow-up. If we don't hear back from people with the phone calls, we just went around. We went to houses of worship on Wednesday night. This was done with a fellow named Clovis Honoré, who's both part of the working group at ICEJ and also a member of Grid Alternatives. And we have had some pretty good conversations. It's moving kind of slowly, but it's a good thing to do. There's two pieces really on the table. Grid is offering free solar installations to qualifying homeowners. This is through the state of California. So Grid is sort of like the middle person for the state of California to reach these folks. The difficult thing is that the income level is kind of a bar because you have to be a homeowner, but the income is still fairly low. So I can't remember. I won't quote anything here, but that's difficult. As Clovis says, the needle in the haystack a little bit. That's the piece though that they're trying to do, and they're just getting into a clean car thing where this is Grid Alternatives, where you would trade in your old gas guzzler and get money toward an electric vehicle. Hopefully, basically, almost completely pay it off with that. So that's something we hope that we'll also be bringing to these. What ICEJ is bringing to these communities is saying, okay, is there an environmental issue of concern to you? And if so, what is that? And that can be a hard sell in a sense, because a lot of these folks they're just surviving. They're not always thinking, they're certainly not necessarily thinking about climate change. And that's not the point, is to get to climate change. It might be transportation, it might be air quality, because that's so poor in many frontline communities. Anyway, we will continue with that BIPOC outreach program, see where it goes. Mobilizing is the more direct action piece. And so this is about banking on our future, calling it here the Banking on Our Future campaign. This was a demonstration back in, let's see, this was March, I think. Yeah, it was a busy couple of months, but we had the Interfaith service in April, the banking event there in March. And we like to work with other groups whenever we can. So to me, you get more bang for your buck. You can piggyback, you can bring in their constituency with your constituency and just get more people. This was a day where it was pouring. It was just pouring. And so I thought, oh my God, we're going to have 20 people at this. We had 50. So I was glad of 50 in the pouring rain. So you can see our banner is the green banner in the back, but we also have people from the Climate Action Coalition. Pretty sure it's a Climate Action Coalition or Climate Action campaign. Sorry. Yes, Climate Action Campaign. That's Allie there in the front. Allie Dressel is kneeling and holding up the sign. And the fellow with the things on his head there in the middle, he was a break dancer. They're kind of like oil derricks that are on his head. He was really good. He was fun, and he didn't slip and fall. I was kind of nervous. It was so wet. There's a fellow from the Sierra Club there, and of course 350 was there too. So at least those 4 organizations were part of that. And we also, Third Act, I forgot to mention Third Act. So Third Act is a group that is working to for older Americans primarily to move their money out of the banks that support the fossil fuel industry, or quit their credit cards if, again, it's through a bank that funds the fossil fuel industry. And the big 4 are Chase, Citibank, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America. And that's one reason we're right there in front of Chase. So we had a demonstration there, and then a bunch of us cut up our credit cards, and said, that's it. We did submit basically a kind of series of demands to the bank. They didn't really get back to us. That's what tends to happen there. But anyway, keep the pressure on and see where that will go. And again, I think the key thing, we need to change the financial sector. The financial sector is still doing things as business as usual, right? And the problem is, it isn't business as usual anymore. We're in a new period. You probably all heard this debate among scientists of whether we're now truly in the Anthropocene era, of having left the Holocene behind. And the Anthropocene would be the era of human beings, because we're such a shaping force that, it's now kind of our period. Sounds like a good thing, but unfortunately, maybe not such a good thing. Anyway, we have to change business as usual. So the Let's Go San Diego thing, this is another thing that's really just gotten underway in the last 2 months or so. And it's an initiative by the city coming out of Sandag, to revamp our whole transportation system, essentially, and to try to move it from such a car-centered culture more toward public transportation. And I know that's difficult, especially here in Southern California. We're used to our cars, we're used to the independence of all that, but it's not sustainable. It's not the right way to go. So what we are doing is actually collecting petitions to put this whole series, and you can see those initiatives at the bottom, infrastructure upgrades. So there will still be some fixing of potholes and blah, blah, blah. Rapid routes, the trolley line to the the rail connecting to the airport. That's always popular. People are asking, yeah, we've needed that forever. Cutting air pollution, of course, would be a side benefit of all of this, preserving open space, and et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and I want to mention about some people, youth, if youth get used to using public transportation, maybe that's just what they'll do. I lived in New York City for 2.5 years. I lived in Jersey. I worked in Manhattan. I never had a car. You didn't need a car in Manhattan, in New York City. You could get wherever you want to go. That's a subway system. I know we don't have a subway system here, and we're probably not going to suddenly build one, but we could still do a lot better. So this is a petition to get this on the ballot, not this November, but November 2024. And so the signatures all need to be collected. I think it's like 100,000 signatures they want. And it would be funded with a increase of 0.5% increase in the sales tax. So that's a dime point. And it would be really the right thing to do. So if you are willing to sign this when we're done, it will be right up here. I do have to kind of witness all of that. They're very strict about that, or they throw the names out. And 350's done a lot of work on this. ICEJ's done less, but we're doing what we can with that. But 350's really taking the lead. And the Environmental Health Coalition, if anybody's heard of them, they're also a terrific organization. Okay, just a couple more slides, and we'll take some Q&A. What can we do as individuals? I'm not going to maybe go through this whole list, but you've probably seen a lot of these things before. You guys are probably mostly vegetarian, right, or even vegan. So you're doing the right thing on that already. That's my hat off to you, because that's so important. You can see that Michael Pollan quote. Transit things can be a little tougher. My wife does ride a bike, and luckily has had no close calls. But and she, by the way, really appreciates. I know if you're a driver, you may be sort of seeing all these bike lanes, and I lost all these parking spots, and this is frustrating, and damn it, and I never see anybody on those bike lanes. Well, there are people on the bike lanes, and she really appreciates it when there's a bike lane. It makes such a difference. And a protected bike lane, even better. Recycling, all that good stuff, really, really important. Considering rooftop solar. Solar hot water is the next step for us. We have some solar panels, but we do need to get a solar hot water heater. So that's something we need to do at my household. Shorter showers is one thing I do. I do those Navy showers. I just turn the water off, soap up, use as little water as I can. Things like that. And that last one is something I just popped in this morning, but it's so important, cultivating hope. You've got to keep your hope going. And I do find activism helps with hope. The more things you do, you get a little more hopeful. Reading the news can be a downer. It's like, oh God, what have we done? What are we doing? But anyway, you keep praying, you keep all that good stuff, meditating. All right, and then what can you do as in congregations and community? Well, again, a lot of things there that facilities can do. Auditing your energy, water, and waste stream, and see where that's at, where you can tighten that up. Investing in solar, starting a community garden. Gardens are great, and gardens are one of the few issues I think where you can get the right and the left to come together. I don't think that it's not just lefties that do gardening. Everybody likes to garden, or I shouldn't say everybody, but people all across the political spectrum like to garden. So it can be a way to really bring people together, I think. And who doesn't like fresh fruit and veggies? I know I do. Community actions, cleanups and rallies, advocate for solutions. Meeting with electeds is really important. 350 does a lot of that. We've done some in ICEJ, but not as much as they do. They have a whole public policy team that is very active, and they're constantly meeting with electeds and doing what they can there. Starting a creation care, you wouldn't call it that probably. I'm sure a green team or something like that in your place of worship, or your in your Buddhist temple. That's a really good thing to do. And again, you probably need at least 3 people that are really devoted to get that off the ground. But it's a good thing to do. And then do some fun stuff. That's one of my recommendations with a green team. Don't just do the heavy, serious stuff. Do some fun stuff too. Keep you going. And of course, you could join the Interfaith Coalition for Justice. So we don't currently have kind of a list of faith communities that have joined us. What we have is sort of people that come to our meetings, people that come to our events. So I'm going to go to that next slide. If you have your phone and you want to actually sign onto our newsletter, please do so. You could do that'll take you, that QR code will take you right there, and you can sign up. We send the newsletter about 6 times a year. It's not too prohibitive. There's some e-blasts that go out in between there, so maybe there's more like 8 or 9, I don't know, over the course of the year. But that will tell you what we're doing, what's going on. You're also, of course, always welcome at our working group meetings. That's basically the board, the planning committee, the whole thing, because we're not big enough to have like those all separate. So we meet every second Tuesday of the month, and from 3 to 4:30. If we finish up at 4, that's even better. But generally, I have a little more on our plate. So you'd be very welcome to join us for that. And it's a good group of people. Generally, it's about 9 people, 10 people. It's not huge, and sometimes it's fewer, but they're good people and they're good faith leaders. One of our members, Emmett Farrell, just got an award from, he's Catholic priest, and he just got an award from some Laudato Si something, because he's terrific. Yusuf Miller, I don't know if people know him. He's a Muslim with the North County Islamic Society in North County, and he is going to, you name it, a social justice event. Yusuf generally is there. He's phenomenal. So that's enough from me. Enough blabbing on. So let's see. Shall I end share? Yeah, let me stop sharing. So that means, let me try by, what if I hit escape? Ah, look at that. I'm not as bad as I think. So let me stop share. Good. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of the participants thing here. Okay. So I am open to any questions from, well, I guess you're going to kind of moderate, right? There may be some in the chat. Okay.
Hi, everyone. For those who are on Zoom, if you have any questions, please kindly either put in the chat or just raise the questions yourself. I do not see any questions right now in the chat box.
I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but yeah.
Well, for me, Phil, you mentioned earlier about young adults, and our founding teacher, Venerable Master Xing Yun, he always focused and believed that the young adults are the future. And you mentioned earlier that I really intrigued me and made me think of what can we do to get the young adults to be more involved in caring about the environment, in everything. I think the young adults, they are the future. And if you could share your church, what have you done, or what have the church done to get the young adults, or is there any way that we could, interconnect, get the young adults here, the temple, and then the young adults from your church? Is the first step that I thought of, but really, based on our founding teacher, Venerable Master Xing Yun, he always taught us and focused on education and young adults. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I assume by young adults too, you kind of mean youth as well, right? Like kids from whatever age. So what I see, it's interesting. 350 has done a terrific job. This is the chapter here in San Diego. 350 has done a terrific job of really reaching out to youth and getting these youth groups going. So there's a youth for climate group. There's a youth versus oil group. There's some overlap there, but and they do all these incredible events. I will say this: it's almost all girls. I don't know where the guys are. It's like, guys, come on here. Anyway, that's maybe a sort of a society problem right now. But anyway, yeah, they're phenomenal, and they do give me a real hope. I think one thing that I will not pretend to be instrumental in getting all that going, but one thing I noticed is that I think with youth, you do kind of need a critical mass of youth to come together to sort of reinforce each other. Again, there's this group, and there are a lot of them, and they work together, and they do their whole thing together, and then they do these events, and I know at my church. Okay, so I go to St. Paul's. We're like a lot of probably Christian denominations. There's a lot of gray hairs, and not as much youth. which is a problem, of course, for the churches. But I do think it's what you want to do is not just get one youth person involved, but somehow get 4 or 5 people involved, and then see if they can pull in more folks. But even just 4 or 5 youth doing something is going to really make a difference. And I think part of it is youth are by nature, I think, somewhat more hopeful about things, and they're they at least all these young women in 350, they seem to really get it. They know what's going on, and they're sort of frustrated with us for the mess that we've kind of created. And I like to say too that what's better than being able to say to the older generation, you really effed up. It's kind of like, Mom and Dad, and I'm going to do it a lot better than you. But anyway, so that could be a galvanizing thing. I don't know how we want to cultivate that. But anyway, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling a little bit here, but I do think youth is so important. And I think many of them are already really concerned, especially the young women. At the cathedral where I go, like I said, there's not a lot of youth, but I also go to another church. It's Episcopal Church St. Luke's in North Park. They have a lot of more younger people, and I haven't done as much there on the creation care end, just partly an issue of limits. But we need to do more. We need to do more. We need to do better. So, not a great answer, but the best answer I can give at this point.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, I see Danny.
I'm Danny, and I wanted to share a couple of things that really resonated with me. You started with overconsumption, and one of the best books I've read on that is by Annie Leonard. I'll bet you know what I'm talking about. It's called The Story of Stuff, and that came out 15, 20 years ago, but a person wouldn't even have to read it. She's got a great video on YouTube, that lasts a half an hour or something, that has the gist of what she says. But even when we think we're under consuming, like buying a t-shirt instead of a nice shirt and stuff, a typical t-shirt goes for $20 now, and she estimated it costs $1 to make it. Now think of that, the immense profit that goes into it, which again leads to exploitation in third world countries where people are, working at substandard wages and stuff to subsidize our consumption, And another thing in terms of consumption, I'm really glad you mentioned Poland, because another great book, and this is going way back, Francis Marlapé, Diet for a Small Planet. And, you're talking to the converted here with Buddhists, because almost all of us are vegetarian. But, if we even, not necessarily were vegetarian, but we ate lower on the food chain, that was Francis Marlapé's argument. If we ate chicken instead of beef and hogs and pork and stuff like that, cattle, for example, the methane gas they produce is 19 times worse than CO2 in terms of global warming and whatnot. It's because of their burping and their farting and stuff, and it costs a lot in terms of grain to feed cattle. So if we ate even lower, it would not necessarily even have to be vegetarian, but although I think it'd be great if we all were, But I just wanted to, give you kudos about consumption, because I think that's a big part of the picture. Thanks a lot, Phil.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, I think this overconsumption is spiritually a really, really bad thing. I just don't think it's a good thing on any level. It's not good for the planet, but it's not really good for us either. And I guess one thing that gives me hope, and again, this is part of my kind of armchair historian thing. So again, I'm born in 1958, and it was already a kind of consumerist culture, certainly in 1958, right? But not on this level. And people didn't get rid of stuff as quickly. And I also can remember, I don't know what they're like now, but going to Britain and people would just wear sweaters with holes in them, because the sweater still works, it still functions, but that's fine. It's not that you're kind of worried somehow if you wear a sweater with a hole in it, oh, you're in a different class or something. So I think this whole thing has changed really in the matter of a lifetime, maybe going back further. I mean, I realize the roots of capitalism and consumerism will go back into the 19th century at least, but still, this huge expansion of that, and everything being built around that. And when you talked about, even certain kinds of marketing that are kind of green marketing, I'm upset to look through the Sierra Club mag and they'll have this 2-page spread of stuff you can buy. I mean, maybe it's like it's a water bottle, but I mean, it's still consumerism. It's sort of like, well, wait a minute. Anyway, if this all happened in just a generation or 3-4 generations, then we could change it in 3-4 generations. It's not going to be easy because we've evolved this very sophisticated kind of high capitalist system, but it can happen. One of the things I think we all need to realize is all these systems, economic systems, they're there for our benefit. They're, and we can change them. They're human constructs. So it just takes will. It takes enough will and enough shifting of values, and things change. Human history is full of these enormous changes that people have done, especially with religions. The way religions have changed whole cultures, and sometimes extremely rapidly. So, it can seem daunting, but I also happen to feel probably with climate change and all of that, the sort of, as we saw with COVID, the supply chains and all of that may get sort of vitiated. And so some of those things won't work as well. We won't be getting as much of that. Even in the developed world, it may get harder to get some of those things. So that may sort of force our hand a bit. Any other questions?
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil, and everyone. I believe that the Venerable has a special gift to present to you for your sharing tonight. Venerable?
So, there's a book written by Venerable Master.
Oh, thank you.
Virgin Nature, and this is a donation
for
everything that you keep on doing.
Thank you for both of these. This is lovely. This is lovely. And I did read that you sent me that article, which I read the whole thing. It was very good. Yeah, excellent. I do. Thank you so much. All right.
Yes. Now I would like to invite Venerable Miao Zhang to lead us for dedication of merits.
Create all worlds.
May we cherish
and build communities to benefit all beings. May Shan
and pure land and precepts inspire equality and patience. May our humility and gratitude give rise to great good.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Phil, for joining us for TBIF. Thank Buddha, it's Friday. Our next TBIF will be on August 25th. The guest speaker will be Linda Lee Garabay. Linda will share with us on the topic of supporting students experiencing homelessness. Please see the link that I have posted and share with everyone in the chat box to enroll. And that is all for now. And so see you next month on August 25th for our next event. Thank you so much and all the best to everyone. Good night and good afternoon, good morning, everything.